Enjoy the Hostilities. Number what? What do you think? 16?
This is number 10, actually.
Number 10.
Number 11.
Number 11. Okay. 11. But it goes up to 11. Podcast. We hang out. Robin Black, your boy Robin Black. We hang out and we talk about martial arts, fighting, professional combat sports, the UFC, global martial arts, bare knuckle boxing, and the things that we learn from studying martial arts, the things we learn from training martial arts, from watching fights, from watching athletes grow and change. That's been a big part of what this podcast has been about. Very quickly, if you are watching on YouTube and you're like, hey, where's the picture? We just don't have the technology today. So we were going to record this strictly for our listeners on Stitcher and SoundCloud and iTunes and wherever the fuck people get podcasts. But then we're like, you know what? Let's just put it here. There's no pictures today. There's no drawings. There's no whiteboard. But that's okay. Hang out with us if you like. And if you don't, we get it. There's a lot of shit going on in the world. But yeah, so we want to... Mark's sitting here with me, so he's going to try to keep me on track with a few thoughts as we go to a few different places. But we wanted to do what we do, and I thought, you know what? By not having video today, I have a feeling it will force some different line of thinking. It'll also force different language. Without hand gestures, without putting fingers up to measure certain things, without a whiteboard, without any of these things, it'll force a different kind of explanation. So I thought, and when Mark mentioned we didn't have certain technology, we're like, fuck it. Let's do it anyways. There's a pleasure in learning and a pleasure in the challenges. We welcome challenges around here. So, number one today, after the hostilities. After the hostilities, we look back at fights or fighters, recent ones. And why do we do that? Well, if fights were awesome, and a lot of them are, and usually the ones we want to look at are, there's something you want to talk about. But as is the case with us here, we tend to see what we can learn. That's always the lens that's put through. Not judging. We're trying not to judge. This was a good fight. This was a bad fight. This guy was bad at this. This was a bad decision. But learning. Why was this done? Why wasn't this done? What did this mean? And actually, I just had a chat just the other day with Joe Rogan and John Anik. If you know who those people. I was about to go, the commentators for fucking UFC. And it came up, what people call a bad fight. Francis Ngannou versus Derek Lewis. And we had this conversation. It's like, if you are, and this is valuable for all things. And I'm talking about after the hostilities and how and why we're going to look at fights. If you are just in judgment mode, you will make a judgment. This was a bad fight, or this was a slow fight, or these guys were lazy, or why were they so... no, you wouldn't say why. You would just make judgments. You will say what you judge it to be. Opinions. You will gather some opinions and apply judgments. If instead... you sit there, and Joe and Anik were both talking about this, and you look at it and you say, why did they behave this way? Why were they like this? How, despite the fact that they would have wanted, nobody's sitting there, they know what the outcome is. They know some people are booing, they're going to get in trouble, they don't know if they're winning or losing, what are we doing here, overthink. Why and how is that happening? And that's what we're trying to get. That's what we're trying to get out of something. And I think the truth comes with you can get to that place with anything in life, but you can get there with a fight like Iaquinta and Kevin Lee. Very easy to cast judgment. So Mark, throw out what some judgments might be. Even just judgments you felt. You look at that fight or conclusions you jump to. Throw some out.
I was hesitant.
Kevin was hesitant. Yeah. Okay. What else? Good or bad? Anything? Al, how was Al doing?
Same old Al.
Yeah. Same old Al. You could be like, same old Al. Or you could be super, you could make positive judgments. Oh man, Kevin was aggressive in round one. And I know that doesn't sound like a judgment, but it isn't a judgment. Aggressive compared to what?
They slow down cardio. Like,
yeah.
There's all the other things that come into play.
Yep. If
like
you start
the
saying
secondary judgments.
Yep. So So let's say Kevin slowed down in rounds 3, 4, and 5. 3, 4, and 5. That may be a judgment. It may be an observation, but then a conclusion you might come to is it's got bad cardio. Okay. Now, if instead, and I'm here to tell you that Kevin won, and I'm not saying that anybody made this conclusion, but Kevin doesn't have, quote, bad cardio, 1. 2, cardio, in quotes, is not as simple as it sounds. But 3, if we just said, why is Kevin slowing down, or why is Kevin not moving forward as much in those rounds? Well, there are a number of things we can go to. Iaquinta is speeding up. Al is pushing the pace. We can use terms we've heard before. Al is the aggressor. All of those things. But if we look at the dynamic between them, all of a sudden, so much more is revealed. Because what's revealed is what we don't know. And Al and Kevin don't know either. But it was a fascinating fight. I don't know. I'm meandering all over the place here.
Sometimes there's even perceived injuries. Like a fighter will think that he's broken his hand or has something injured, fucked up his rib, and then will sort of let up and whatnot. Then finds out after the fact when he takes some echoes. Yep. Oh, no, I'm fine.
Yeah.
They don't really want to talk about that after the fight and say that was an issue because, it will look really bad on you, obviously, right?
There's so many things. Fuck, it's incredible. It's incredible how many things are happening at any given time. So you are you make a very interesting point. One I haven't heard made very often. But someone's hesitating. Why? So you won't think to yourself, my nose is broken, I better move backwards. But if you do think your nose is broken, for a moment, now you're busy analyzing yourself when you should be analyzing the scenario. If you don't even know why, you cannot breathe, somebody has jabbed you in the face so often you move back. You won't be able to explain it yourself. But every fighter knows what I'm talking about here, and every fighter can observe it in somebody else. So if Kevin goes and looks at somebody, at a fighter fighting, and they eat a lot of jabs or they eat a lot of shots and they start to move back, Kevin would make that observation and say, what's happening here? Well, it might be, and again, he can't make a judgment because it's what's happening in the mind of the other person, but he's like, it might be that he is discouraged because of all the jabs.
I'm breaking him.
Yeah, I'm breaking him. But if we freeze in the moment of the fight, Kevin's moving backwards slightly, and I say, Kevin, are you discouraged? He'd be like, no fucking way. I'm not discouraged, because the conscious part of Kevin's brain is not fucking discouraged.
It's the physical reaction.
Yeah, it's the nervous system. There's so fucking much happening in there.
And it's almost like, with Rory and Robbie, you think Rory didn't want to continue? His body, that nose break, he literally shut down.
Mm-hmm. That's the extreme example. And the great thing about extreme examples is we can connect to them. So for anybody who saw Rory McDonald versus Robbie Lawler, and if you haven't, for some reason, and you are listening to a podcast about fighting, there aren't many times I'll say pause it and go back, but go watch that fight. The reason that's such a great example is because it's an extreme example. And the reason an extreme example is so good is because you can see it. You can taste it. You can feel it. You see Rory McDonald trying to move as his body is flopping around. So that is the extreme physical and neurological response to the damage that he took. But it isn't binary. It's not either full shutdown like Rory McDonald. This actually, you made a great point here. It's helped me a lot to get to this. It's not full shutdown like Rory McDonald or no shutdown whatsoever and everything is normal. It's all a gray area. So some of that amount, Iaquinta taught Kevin Lee to move backwards. That's the dynamic of what happened in that fight. Now, if you ask Al about it, and I haven't talked to him, although I love both of these guys. I kind of hated watching them fight, but I was also very excited for both of them in a weird way. What I hated is that one of them had to lose, and that's just a reality. But it was, and it's hard because I'm watching Al be successful as the fight goes on, and I'm excited for him. And I'm watching Kevin, who has hopes and dreams and desires and works so hard and is so focused, and so he needs to be the greatest, and I love that about him. And seeing him coming up short in moments doesn't mean he came up short in the fight. I'm not a fucking judge. I don't know, but any of that shit, it's none of my business. My business is what we're talking about right now. So it's tough. It's tough to watch. But if you ask Al, he'll say, bro, it's in me. I got heart that these other guys don't have. Mm-hmm. He's making a judgment about himself because he feels that. And in that moment, as he's roaring in Kevin's face at the end of it, and as he's pushing on and he's got more in him, and he felt it only, 8 months ago or less against Khabib, and this is part of who I am if I'm Al Iaquinta. He feels that's who he is.
He's a Raging Al.
Raging Al.
Yeah.
Who I think he got that nickname because he's a bit of a raging alcoholic. Now,
that or the hotel room incidents.
Yeah, don't quote me on that. I'm not sure. But I fucking love Al Iaquinta. And Kevin, I mean, man, like we've gotten to know both of them, but we've gotten to know Kevin a lot. And I've commentated his brother's fights, and I introduced Kevin to George St. Pierre.
Kevin was a tougher one to watch, because of that. And especially, like, no one looks into the psychology. I know there's been some discussion on the mentality part of Kevin Lee, but when you look into it, I think he re-signed with the UFC, so he's got the new fight deal. Signed with CA management, so now there's that.
Yeah, pressure.
And there's so many. Plus, with his coach passing away, there was so much more things circling around his brain than he didn't have in previous fights compared to Ferguson, the Ferguson fight or whatnot, right?
But when you look at those things, so Kevin Lee with a new deal and a new management company, and in that environment, he's exactly where he should be.
Yeah.
And he kind of knows that.
And it's actually best for his career to be where he's at.
Yeah. But even
all
him,
those things.
If he looks at himself as a winner and a champion, and he does look at himself that way, and that's real, then he's where he should be. Winners and champions should be in this environment, should be with that kind of coach, and should have this kind of deal. Exactly. Should be in these kinds of fights, and he is. So the way you deal with these pressures is you acknowledge step one, acknowledge they exist. Because if you ignore them, or you say, man, there's nothing there. I can handle that. I'm mentally strong. Nobody's mentally strong. People are strong in moments based on the work that they did to create that moment. Matt Brown told me that. We're like, hey, man, you're mentally strong. And this is what I'm trying to say about Al. Al will tell himself, bro, I am a different man. I am more than these guys. I'm mentally more than them. That's true at this moment. But if you go and you eat sandwiches that are made with white bread and puffy and filled with, and you eat chocolate and you get 5 hours sleep and you party and you don't train hard, you won't be that. The only reason Al is that is it is a culmination of everything that he has decided to commit to. It is a result of work. Al Iaquinta or Matt Brown or Kevin Lee or fucking Joe Rogan or anybody is not mentally strong. They are a result of extreme hard work, which creates a strength that exists in those moments. That's what Al is. And Kevin is that too. And Kevin what you find is that when you go in, you're like, I can't be broken. Well, when two motherfuckers think that, one of them can be wrong.
Right.
And Rory was wrong on that night because he could physically be broken. And Kevin was not mentally broken and he was not physically broken, but these are not one or the other. People are like, do you and we see this a lot, and this is nobody's fault. This is just the way we look at things. You look and you see Khabib and Conor McGregor on stage, and they're talking to each other. Somebody's like, bro, who got broken? This is not binary. You're not either 100% good or 0% good. You're not either 0% broken or 100% broken. We're all ever-changing things. And what Kevin won't like this, but if he can look back at rounds 3, 4, and 5 and go, fuck, I needed more out of myself due to the results of what Al Iaquinta did, credit to him, I couldn't get that out of myself no matter how much the primary part of my brain wanted it. And if you think this is a sidebar, and we'll move on, because the beauty of what we're talking about now is this is going to open up many exciting conversations for the future. But we've touched on this before, but there are two systems of which the way we interface with the world. One of them, Mark, what's 1 + 1?
2.
What is 260 multiplied by 8?
Oh, jeez.
You could figure it out, though.
Right.
How would you figure that out? You'd grab a calculator, you would take a bunch of actions, you would look at it, you would recheck it, then you would tell me that.
Yes.
That's a different part of the brain than what's 1 + 1.
Right.
Those are
reactionary versus the process.
Yeah, one is process oriented and one is natural. And that natural one was the one that was having a problem. The Kevin Lee, that is primarily Kevin Lee, that's saying, dude, move forward, get your thing going, establish the kick, slip your head off. That thing is doing its thing, and that thing was never discouraged. But the 1 + 1 part of his brain was going, don't move forward right now, there's a jab. Or even parts that he can't explain, there's something became hotter than he's normally experienced, and as he pushed strong Kevin Lee forward, 1 + 1 Kevin Lee didn't go forward, and that's fucking real.
Can sparring remedy that?
The more you
because I think that's related to muscle memory in a way, right?
Yeah. Every time you've overcome that, I mean, I'm trying to think of some of the amazing. We've actually used these examples multiple times, but one is Robbie Lawler. Robbie Lawler failed in round 5 against Hendricks,
right.
And then the next round 5, he fucking just
took it over.
Yeah. The experience of it, the experience of that failure allowed him to examine it and change who he was and prepare himself for it to come. And you see the beginning of round 5, Robbie Lawler is standing there. Well, it's a third Robbie Lawler fight we're talking about. Yeah. Just go back and watch some fucking Robbie Lawler before that guy fights Ben Askren, man. And Robbie Lawler's standing there, and his eyes are closed, and his hands are wide, and he's taking a deep breath in, saying, I fucking worked hard to get back here, and I got this. And Kevin will do the same thing. Kevin will do the same thing. These experiences, if and when Kevin fulfills what he sees as his destiny to become champion or the greatest or whatever he's looking for, if and when he does that, it will be, these failures will be a massive importance of it. And that is why, it is a wild thing, and we don't have we're going to move on to Jones versus Gustafsson in a second, because we were going to talk about Holloway, but we'll come back to that when there's another 45 fight or something else coming up, or maybe we'll come back to it later today. But if you look at a fight as 25 minutes, and you look at a fighting career as 15 years, the 25 minutes are just a little drop of it, I talked about this on Instagram Live earlier today. Fucking, what's his name? That Bellator guy I was just talking about, Aaron Pico.
Oh, yeah.
Fuck. Like, everybody freaked out like Aaron Pico was bullshit when he lost. What the fuck is wrong? Like, Aaron Pico's fighting career will be 15 minutes. That was 1 minute.
Yeah.
And whatever he accomplishes, that minute will play a massive role in it. If he is great, and he is already great, but if he's as great as he has the potential to be.
He's expected to be the LeBron James of MMA.
Yeah. And if he is, that fucking minute and a half will play a massive part of it. And if Kevin Lee becomes a superstar, super champion, as he may, these rounds where Iaquinta was on that day more man than him, and I hate to say that, and Kevin, if you are listening, which you might be, because this is an interesting, fair conversation, I think, and you're looking for information everywhere, and we're good friends, he won't like to hear that, and it is a slang, and it is incredible oversimplification, but Iaquinta was able to do more and be more in those moments than as they went on than Kevin was. And if and when Kevin achieves even more greatness than he already has, this will be a part of it. The Tony Ferguson fight is a part of it. The spinning head kick that he took from Edson Barbosa is a big part of it. These setbacks and these failures are massive ingredients.
And the light at the end of the tunnel, I mean, just to bring it back around, when we were talking about Ngannou and Derek Lewis, look at compare that fight to now when he just knocked out Curtis Blades. Yeah, like you can turn back around really quick,
big time. Sometimes it's from a perspective of the world of the outer viewers, which for the best fighters and the best performers is truly irrelevant, except for how it may irrelevant to them and who they are and the meaning of their performances. It may be relevant to their careers, but it's not relevant to what they are. the perspective will change immediately. People are literally like, "Oh my God, Francis Ngannou is the greatest thing ever. It's over. How did he turn the corner so quick?"
Even Dana White, I don't know if he'll ever be the same again.
Exactly, exactly. And yet now it's like, oh, maybe he should fight for the title. These things change dramatically. But in the grand, and again, if he becomes incredibly, a dominant champion one day, he would have never been capable of doing it without losing to Stipe and then having a terrible engagement. He couldn't get himself to do what he wanted.
He may cringe and look at that fight, but he would be appreciative if he becomes a champion, for sure.
It's true. And I think that goes back to it. If you're going to look at it, was that a bad fight? It was a fight. It was what it was. It existed in the way it existed. It
needed to happen, too.
Exactly. But what he can say is he did not perform, and in a subtle way, and this is careful because Iaquinta deserves all the credit for that win. When I'm talking about Kevin Lee right now, I'm only talking from Kevin Lee's perspective. From Iaquinta's perspective, he'll build on this even more. He knows he can overcome a couple bad rounds. He knows he can handle this pain. He knows he can be even greater than he was if he looks at it and doesn't think, I'm Iaquinta, I can't be hurt. And instead he goes, look what I was capable of with this much work. How much more can I be capable of? But
and the confidence of going 5 rounds against Khabib on a day's notice.
Yeah, exactly.
In his mind, he must be walking around his gym as like Mr. Untouchable.
yeah. Although you don't want that either. You want to be looking to be even greater.
Right.
But Iaquinta is very special. But and so he deserves the credit. But for Kevin Lee too, and again, this is a direct result of Iaquinta's incredible hard work and his elite performance. But Kevin Lee got, let's say, Robbie Lawler in round 5 against Hendricks the second time is a 99th percentile performance.
Right.
And performance, ability to get performance from yourself, not a judgment in how you fight, not in what we think of it, but in your own ability to get yourself to do what you want to do. Robbie Lawler, let's say, is a 98th percentile. And let's say Francis Ngannou, years later, you say, Francis, score your own ability to get yourself to do what you want. Not how you punched and kicked and not what the fight looked like, but when you said, Francis, move forward, and you didn't, or you said, Francis, I need to get myself to do more, and you didn't, how would you rate your own fighting, your performance, your ability to perform? And he's like, a 40%. Well, Kevin on this night might have been an 80 in round 1 and a 60 in round 4. Mm-hmm. You have to, and if that is so, why is that? If it is something as simple as cardio, quotations, well, shit, we can improve that. We'll just go work on that. Yeah. But if it isn't, if it's something like the ability to make yourself better than you are under duress, yes, it's training and it's every performance and it's self-analysis and it's working on you, the person, and it's hard work and it's a complex game and it's a scary game. And these things are
and that, sorry to interrupt, but that could lead to even more regression because if you realize there's something you need to change, now you need to go through the entry-level phases of that, be bad at that to get good. So, you're not you can't expect to go on a 3-fight winning streak right after. You might take another loss or 2 after that.
That's right. That's exactly right.
In order to make you elevate your game.
Yep. Let's say you want to be better at, and sometimes if we think of it simply in life, let's say you have 2 jobs and they're really important. You want to add a 3rd job. That 3rd job, those other 2, you're going to do less. So you're going to make less money. You're going to make less improvement in those while you make almost no improvement at first or no money on the new job because you're shitty at it. And now not only are you moving slower, you're progressing slower, but your overall value gain, in this case it's money, and the others it would be self-improvement, slows down too. So in the short run, you're like, oh my God, I'm a worse fighter than I was last week by working hard on this particular skill or thought process or footwork or whatever you're adding. But in the long run, that in that 15-year career, instead of the 15-minute moment that we judge, you change. But these somehow, to me, this is what I find interesting. And again, it might be for our purposes, depending on what our short-term purposes are, sitting here making a podcast might be like, how could we get 100,000 people to listen today? Well, if I called Dana White a name, or I said this guy's the greatest, or this guy sucks, or I called out somebody on the air, that would work in the short term. But in the long term, examining these ideas will make us better. Will attach us a deeper audience that they will later look back, and if we'll find the right ones who find this kind of fascinating. And it's the game. It's a game. It's an ongoing, long form game. If the goal for anybody is how do we win tonight, that's a lot different than how do we be the greatest in 15 years. And I don't know. I saw a lot of that in that fight, and I guess my last thought is I really hope that Al uses that brilliant performance to know he's not even reached his potential, and I hope that Kevin uses it to see, and looks at it honestly, and says, wow, I just discovered something exciting. And that is, look how fucking good I am, and I still have areas to improve. Because Kevin has become, I think, friends with George. I introduced them and had them train together. And I'll tell you, when you talk to George St. Pierre, the moment he finds out he's bad at something, he's like a little kid. Holy shit, I just found something that it will be hard to improve, but if I improve it, I will get better. Because George just wants to get better every day at something in life. Yep. And if that something is low kicks, or that something is doing his taxes, he doesn't give a fuck. He wants to get better. And when he finds an area of weakness, he gets thrilled because that's an area he can improve. Because it's hard for George to get stronger or faster. You start maxing out eventually. Most of us never max out our potential. George has probably maxed it out in 8 areas of his life as an athlete and a human. So he needs to keep finding places where he's weak. And so if Kevin looks at it like that and says, honestly, I needed to be even able to get more out of myself when in fire, it'll excite him. And it'll be exciting to see where he goes. Let's take a look at Alexander Gustafsson. If you hear a sound, I'm just drinking out of a iced coffee. Alexander Gustafsson versus Jon Jones, number 2. If you are watching on YouTube, you're like, hey, where the fuck's the picture? We just didn't have a piece of technology today, and yet we said to ourselves, you know what, fuck it. Let's. I got Mark here with me, and we said, let's just do a podcast for the podcast audience. And Mark's like, put it up on YouTube too, because we got such a loyal audience there, and they'll want it. So thank you for hanging with us. When we go to look at Jon Jones versus Gustafsson too, there are a lot of it. To me, as is often the case, this is a case of. There's a lot of things here, but among them is, I'm just typing something if you hear my fingers. A lot of them, or one of them is nature versus nurture. Something we've talked about a lot. We will talk about many times in this podcast and many other places. Nature versus nurture, an ongoing debate in sport, in all types of things. I mean, so very quickly, there is a belief that two books that I've read, the 2 of them, and these 2 were 2 in conflict. I'm sure there are much more modern ones than these now. One is called The Sports Gene, that basically says, hey, look, man, you're never going to be LeBron James unless you were born with LeBron James's genetic code. And the other one is Talent is Overrated. You put those 2 books together. That one says, actually, it doesn't matter what the fuck you're born with. 2 conflicting ideas. Yeah. Talent is Overrated says, if we start you training and we have a little more time and a little more effort and a little better training, a little more knowledge, that we can eclipse, the genetically superior athlete many times over. My truth to this is they are both true. And I don't even think these 2 things are in conflict. I think they work together. Jon Jones so let's start with this. Jon Jones is a fucking genius. He is a brilliant athlete. He's a brilliant creative artist. He's a devious artist, which is a big part of who he is and what he is. And he's one of the greatest ever. If you want to talk about drug test failures and crashing cars and stuff, I'm not interested in that today. I understand if we are debating greatest of all time and how that is structured and stuff, by all means, you got to throw in things like that, how people would be remembered and legacy and all those kinds of shit. And those are all valid conversations. I'm talking strictly about athletic performance and accomplishments today. Why is he so good? Well, we used to say, Jon Jones, I'm just pulling up, and I'm only doing this for the purpose of dates. Jon Jones, early Jon Jones, where's Jon Jones? Click. Early Jon Jones would be, holy fuck, is there a lot of fights already, eh? Jesus.
Exactly.
You look back to Jones and you're like, Vladimir Matyshenko, 2010. I mean,
Matyshenko was his debut, or
Vera.
Vera,
yeah. Oh no, sorry. Brandon Vera was after he lost. He actually had
Matt Hamill?
three before that. Guzmão, Stephan Bonner. Stephan Bonner was the breakout one.
Yeah,
Stephan Bonner was like,
when
holy
he did
fuck.
that suplex and Joe
spinning elbows,
Silva freaked out.
Diagonal spinning.
The spinning
diagonal
elbow.
spinning elbows.
Jesus
suplexes.
Christ.
Then he beat up Jake O'Brien and submitted him, who's a very good fighter.
I think that was when he first moved to Jackson's as well. I think the Bonner fight was his first fight with Jackson's.
Yeah, either that.
I suspect that or the one before.
Yeah, no, the one before I think he was with someone else.
That was when he was fighting in New York with that.
and then he was.
I can't remember his name, but he's a Muay Thai guy. He's native.
Yep, he was spending time in Vegas too. You would see him in boxing gyms in Vegas. I got inside stuff from people that had him come in and spar some of their guys early. And even people who didn't know about MMA boxing, people were like, holy shit, look at this athlete. Now, so the reason I bring up Matyshenko, Bader, also, what is Bader not the champion of in Bellator today? You know what I mean? Like, these are good fighters. So back then we would, and some of it's negativity driven, some of it is just honest, observation, some of it is theory. There's all kinds of reasons, but people would be like, he's got tons of reach, and he's super athletic. And Jon didn't like that. He'd be like, I'm so much more than that. And he is, and he was then.
Because it's discrediting his creativity.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's fair. Because what I'm getting at is, he would say it was discrediting his skill and ability and work ethic. And we'll touch on the creativity in a second. But later, I think hanging out with Rogan was one of them, but was a big one of them. But in many occasions, he talked about his very little work ethic in many environments. And in fact, even self-sabotaging himself, getting high the week of fights and stuff.
Right.
Like,
just to see if he could do it.
Yeah. So he discredited his own work ethic with conversation. And certainly nobody from that gym ever said to me directly, Jon Jones doesn't work hard. But by spending enough time having people accept me as a analyst and fighter, and they know I love fighting and being around people and spending time at Greg Jackson's, you don't have to look very hard to hear from particular horses' mouths that Jon doesn't work hard. And so if we remove hard work from it, so we're going back to nature versus nurture. Nature is what you're exposed to and how you develop. Nurture is how you develop, the work that you did, how we nurtured your skills, what you learned, how you grew and how you evolved and how you became
your
this.
habits.
And so Jon didn't like when we were saying a lot of his greatness was nature, which means he was born with long arms. He was born really tall. He's very athletic. His brothers are professional athletes. Even to a certain degree, although this is a difficult to even differentiate conversation, and it goes deeper than sports. It goes into existence and shit. But even mindset, how much of that is nature? Were you born with an ornery vibe, or was that what you were exposed to as a child? And again, the answer is both. There are particular people who, or work ethic even. Work ethic is definitely learned, but some kids will fucking go and work really hard at 4 years old and others won't.
Yep.
There's a genetic component even to work ethic itself. But Jones did not like it when we were like, even the word gifted to a great degree, I don't like to hear, because I feel it discredits what you are and how you make yourself. And this is all about growth and getting better. But no matter how you slice it, by admitting and the insight that he didn't work that hard, some amount of his ability to perform so well is credited to nature, what he was born with. but his physical gifts, his attributes. Some of it is. How much better he gets every day, that is nurture.
Yep.
So we take Alexander Gustafsson or any other person. Same thing. Now, in Gustafsson's case, he has some of the same nature. He has reach. He has height, right? And so all of a sudden, what you are doing, and Jones may still have been, with less work, be a stronger athlete or a faster man or have better athletics abilities. I don't know what Gustafsson's brothers or sisters, if he has any, what they're like compared to Jon Jones.
Right.
But what we're looking at is the balance in this fight between nature and nurture. So I think we've established that idea well in Jon Jones using as an example. And I never want to undermine or talk detrimentally about Jon Jones because I admire this incredible athlete and artist a great deal. But yes, you also said it undermines his creativity. And I think that's true as well. A big part, if Jones just had reach and was strong and fast, he'd have already been beaten. He's smart and he sees it differently. And he has a willingness, a freedom to just say, yeah, I'm going to spin or kick or crawl or do something different or rip on the arm. And he's innovative in the moment. He'd never ripped anybody's shoulder off like he did to Glover Teixeira's. Yeah. He'd never done that.
It was all just in the moment.
In the moment. Some of that again. And then why do I keep harping on this part? One is I think it's interesting, but two, I think this is worth examining the world through this lens. How much of who we are is what we were born with and how we were born, and how much of it is our work ethic. And I think this conversation can and will last for all existence.
And as well, I'll throw in a wild card actually to kind of mess things up, throw it into chaos. Sometimes there's people who have something happen to them in between where they can be not off the nurture or not off the nature. You know, they may not have the mentality, but something will happen to them and now they have the mentality.
That their path has changed. That the river is blocked or open to another stream.
I have someone I know that was very peaceful. As a teenager, house got broken into, robbed, became very angry and very violent, and then ended up becoming a kickboxer champion. So in my mind, if that house never got broken into, he would have never been a kickboxer. True.
But many houses were broken into by many people, and they did not become kickboxers.
Yes.
So some of it is the timing of that scenario. This is a existential conversation. This is an existential conversation. This isn't just, is Jon Jones genetically, how much of Jon Jones is genetic superiority and how much of it is learned? The reason, I'll come back to the existential moment. The reason this conversation began was to say, let's say, and I'm just throwing these out, please don't use numbers for these reasons because they're not real, but let's just say, Jon Jones was a genetic 9 out of 10 of what would be the greatest attributes for fighting. And it's multiplied, and it isn't. This is just for the illustration of saying it. It's multiplied by 10 in environmental and in nurture to make 100. This isn't so. This is just for the sake of conversation. But if Jones was a 9 out of 10 and his work ethic or his nurture was a 5 out of 10, you got 45. If Gustafsson was an 8 out of 10 and his work ethic was a 6 out of 10, you got 48. Do you see what I'm saying? Please don't make this the standard by which we compare nature to nurture, but this conceptually, you see it. So Jones being maxed out or being super high genetically, the greatest improvements he can make in the way he performs and what he does is through hard work and through nature. And what this allows you to do is have the highest level of maximum achievement with your genetics. Whereas when we say, Mark, you're a really hard worker, you're a 9 out of 10 in nature, you're exposed to the greatest coaches, but you have a small rib cage and you are short and you have this and your musculature is only like that and there's a weakness in your... Exactly. Yeah. That we reach our maximum when we combine those two things. And what that means is Jon Jones's maximum is insanely high. And if and when he's done the work, especially if he'd never done it before, that's terrifying. But then on the other side, Gustafsson, who was very close to him by all accounts in that last fight, where does he improve? Well, if he can also, and before I say this, we look back at Gustafsson. Gustafsson, look at the improvements that he made between, you look back at his fights.
From Phil Davis onwards.
Yep. You look back, man, like
even prior, man, like that Phil Davis was a very that was like I wouldn't say an asterisk, but like Phil got him on wrestling, but his stand up was very sophisticated. Many fights prior to that.
Well, even Mauricio, like Shogun, even Shogun before Jon Jones was 8-9 months earlier. Maybe 10, like we're early December till late September. And he was fucking so much better on the night. Nobody anywhere. Like, Jones was on this roll. Nobody anywhere saw Gustafsson winning minutes off Jones. Never mind winning rounds off of him. He became better on every night leading up to that. It was the greatest he's ever looked, and he partly motivated by it, partly driven by it. So there's so many things at play.
And he was very young, too, so I think there was a little bit of naivety. Like, he was... thinking I can do it. Like, there wasn't any of those pressures or anything like
just
that.
Just the pure belief. Pure belief, which allowed him to be free to perform. It's going to be amazing. I love what I'm seeing now. When you see people talk about it, people will ask, whose time off will have changed them the most? This conversation didn't exist 3-4 years ago. People were like, what about this guy's creativity versus this guy's low kicks? As if they weren't constantly changing, ever-changing athletes and artists. They are. So that's what's at play here. Again, the reason people make a pick or the reason people say things with authority in settings, it is a natural, true conversation of humans to say, I don't know, man, it's going to be crazy. Like, this guy could be so much better, but what if this guy... That's a natural thing. What we see is television producers for generations have said, be authoritative. And I remember 7 years ago saying, but I don't know. It could be either this or that. No, you have to be authoritative. You have to say, make a pick. You're the expert. Yeah, yes, I am becoming the expert. And as an expert, I can tell you cannot make this pick. The more you know,
the more you don't know.
Exactly. But this has become, we think it's normal to say, this guy will do this and this guy's better at that, but he can't prevent this. But if this guy, all of that is out the window. But to circle back to what we were saying earlier, where you introduced the idea of a guy in a moment of unpredictable turmoil has a strong reaction, still nurture to a great degree, but becomes a kickboxing champion after his house is broken into. What does that mean? Well, that's nurture. That's a response to something. But then we look at it. 10 other guys had their houses broken in, none became kickboxing champions. Yeah. What was different? Well, that guy was a different human being, an individual. How much of that is genetically who he is, and how much of that is what he learned from his father and brother and the people around him. Again, it's nature.
So the anger was already there. It was just the break-in took to open up the cap, and then the anger was only now channeled through kickboxing and became a champion.
Or fear or anxiety. Or that he is one of 10 who in the exact same situation would respond this way. But even that, why is he one of 10? Is that a genetic predisposition to this? Or is that because of experiences he had that he can't even remember as an 8-year-old?
Right.
Is it nature or is it nurture? This is the question of who we all are and why we are all what we are. That's really what this is. Why do you do the things that you do? Why do you be, I know this is off topic, but I just saw I'm just pulling it up for you. They're wondering why I just saw something called fundamental attribution error. And I got this from Seth Godin. The fundamental attribution error is based on a glitch in the way we understand causation and statistics, and it's fueled by our own unique view of ourselves. When someone else screws up, it's because of who they are, or their age, or their race, or their gender, or their upbringing, and it's a glimpse into their true character. We see Jon Jones, you go, see, he's a piece of shit. See, he was raised in this environment. Or see, this is what men do, or whatever. People make that generalization. Yeah. But when we are in a weird situation, we go, man, I was tired. I didn't do this. The way I was raised. Truth is, Jon Jones is just a product of all those things, just like every one of us. Yeah. It was environment. It was things he learned, his responses to things that happened to him. He was shaped into this. And when each one of us looks at ourselves this way, you fuck something up or you do something bad or you make a mistake, you know, and you really give yourself an honest view of why you did that. You'll look back at it and you'll start to pull in, well, you know, if I hadn't failed that course in high school, that caused this. And now that I don't have a job, I had to do this. And you're a good person in weird circumstances. But when Jon Jones does it, you go, see, he's a piece of shit. See, that guy can't be trusted. See, he's a criminal.
Can a coach see those things and rationalize those things? And is it their responsibility to deliver that to the fighter?
I think if we are looking for it, if we have empathy, we all can see those things. So Greg... When I've observed Greg Jackson with Jon Jones and bits and pieces and stuff, you feel his empathy for him. And yes, of course, Greg Jackson and Brandon and all their other coaches, of course, there are going to be elements of you're looking at this incredible athlete, and the mind of an incredible athlete. And again, if we took tidbits of this conversation, you know, that are about his reach and his strength and his brother's athletic ability and whatever, maybe we've understated how rare and unique the mind of Jon Jones fighting, what makes him him. But when you see this and you're Greg Jackson, you're like, oh my God, we gotta help this guy achieve his potential. But once you get to know him, his potential is irreversibly tied up into how he thinks, as all ours are. He's a fucking human. And like, I'm always shocked. I'm not shocked. I'm saddened. And I'm not saddened in a judgmental way. I'm saddened in a how do we do better way. When people like, they just sit there and judge Jon, and even good fighters. If I had Jon Jones' physical traits, if I had his attributes, it's like, but you are what you are. Like, if you also had his experiences and his fears and his anxieties and his self-doubts and his maybe addictions, whatever is there that are all
level of jadedness, you wouldn't approach the game the same way that
you would never. The reason you're not Jon Jones,
the exact same way he would approach
exactly.
it.
The reason you're not Jon Jones is because you're not Jon Jones. And I'm not here to tell you, I am certainly far from rich, but I'm not making an excuse for any friend of mine that I've ever met that seems to have a lot of money. But we'd all look at them and go, man, if I had that money, I would do this, this, or this. But the truth is, as soon as you have that money, you've changed. And things come with it. I knew a guy, and we weren't super close. A friend of mine played in his band, but he was worth nobody knew, but $10, $20 million. And he wanted to be a musician. And he wanted to be a performer. And he went, and I can't actually remember his first name, but my friend, and not that I would give it out anyways, but my friend played with him. I didn't know him super well. But one thing I could see is when he met attractive women who seemed to like him, he never knew if they loved him. Never, ever, ever, never, ever. And you'd look at it and go, man, I would meet all these people, life would be great, and I would give away money, and I would give money to charity, and I would start a gym, and I would invite homeless people, invite people, like downtrodden people to come train at my gym, and all these ideas that any of us would have. But that guy, all he wanted to do was be a performer. And as a result of having a bit of money, he was able to do things we couldn't do. But he didn't know, if the audience actually cared about him, if his musicians actually liked the music, all of those things. And I know it would sound a lot better to not scramble to figure out how you're going to pay your rent or get one more piece of equipment to do a podcast or whatever we do, but to never know how if somebody else cared about you or was actually your friend or loved you or any of those things, that would change you. If you were and now transfer that to Jon Jones, a human being just like you or I. You're sitting there and you're never quite sure, are these people training with me because they care about me? Are my coaches do they love me? And I know it sounds like I'm making excuses for the rich, but or the successful or whatever. And I don't know what it's like to be them, but I look at them with the same worry that life is hard as I do for somebody who has no money because it's hard for everybody, and life's fucking hard for Jon Jones.
Imagine living in a world where nobody tells you the truth.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody's honest to you at all.
Exactly.
Everyone wants something from you.
Yeah, exactly. And then what does that mean? And how does that change you? And of course, we'd like to say, I'm just texting someone. I'm doing
the one thing I will say though about Jon Jones when it comes to when people talk about him working hard and whatnot, those types of opinions and whatnot come from general sports fans who are usually followers of NBA, NFL, NHL, whatever may be other major sports organizations. Now, the thing you need to keep in mind is MMA is so unique in the sense of athletes or fighters, sometimes it's actually quote unquote beneficial for them to not be as disciplined. Yeah. Let's take basketball, for example. There's many players out there, like you look at LeBron James, he's one of the greatest because he's so disciplined, because he invests in himself, because he's dedicated. Now, there's another player who was drafted in the exact same class, Carmelo Anthony, who was just as talented, born with so much talent that he refused to work in the offseason. Like, he came in out of shape and whatnot. See, that's the type of stuff that you can see and you can relate to in professional sports. Yeah. But if you look at that in MMA, someone with that Carmelo Anthony type approach can still be super successful compared to the LeBron James type. There's
a lot of reasons that is, and that is among them is 5 years from now, today, most people are as good as Jon Jones was 2 years ago.
That's true.
You know, they have the skills, they've figured it out, they have a bit more freedom. The game is elevated. But if Jon Jones is 2 years ahead still, that's no problem.
He can still coast.
Yeah, he'll still coast. And what does it take him to get 2 years ahead? If he's that good, it doesn't take much. But if it takes a lot of work to get 2 years ahead, and Gustafsson's doing 3 or 4 times the work, or focused in different ways, or has changed himself to get more out of work, that's another element. It's not just, well, you put in 10 hours, I put in 10 hours. What if you put in 10 hours and then 3 hours to improve your ability to improve your ability? Where you actually gain more through improving your focus or improving your commitment or journaling in the morning or at night or meditation or whatever outside thing you can add changes so that your 10 hours, you actually get 12 hours worth. In 100, you'll get 120. That's a fuckload of difference. So all of that is at play. But we're going to have to talk about Jones versus Gustafsson again, maybe through a more conventional lens, but maybe not. Yeah. I mean, you know, I've just started, and we've always had a certain amount of people like, what the fuck is that guy talking about? And I get, or that guy says a lot of, this one's my very favorite. People will be like, that guy says a lot of things but doesn't really say anything. Yeah. You know, just because you don't yet understand. And I'm not trying to be a dick. I'm really not. But, and this is useful in any number of ways, or tell me to go fuck myself. But I hear people talk about medicine, and I listen to it, and I go, that guy's not saying anything, because I don't understand fucking medicine. I don't understand medicine. I listen to mechanics talk about what's under the hood of a car, and it just sounds like gibberish to me, because I don't fucking know anything about fucking a mechanic. But I don't look at them and say, that guy's an idiot. He spent 20 years of his life. He probably knows something, and I know very little. And that's fucking what it is to study anything for a long, long time. And it becomes incredibly complicated, and it becomes incredibly hard. And yes, you can spend thousands of hours pursuing an idea that amounts to nothing, that literally amounts to nothing. But the value of having done that is it teaches you what amounts to nothing for now. But then you also see patterns in how these things change and rechange and rechange. And if you study martial arts for a year, it isn't just that you only have a year of study, but you only have that year. If you were fortunate enough to live for 100 years, which I don't think most of us will, although we live in a modern time where it's possible, you would have 100 times of watching the process of it. You would have, I'm old now. I've seen bell bottoms 3 times. I've seen them 3 fucking times for real, for like dead serious. Including they're wearing them.
The introduction of bell bottoms.
Exactly. And when you're looking at that, it isn't just, hey, look, there's those stupid things again. It's, why do people behave this way? What is it about change that creates this moment? What is that a reaction to? Oh, wait a second. Punk rock was a reaction to this kind of music. Well, when will we see that again? How can that translate into how people change in the way they fight? How can you see? Time allows you to see things change over and over again. And within the change itself, you see patterns. And this fight is very much like that. But
and also, just to go on top of what people are like with the comments, like, you're saying a whole lot of this, a lot of nothing. Listen, I think at the end of the day, before you make that comment, you need to analyze and take a look at yourself and think what you expect of people and when you know of them. If you know someone is a certain way and talks a certain way, you can't go up to them and expect them to talk to you with a southern accent and whatnot just because it makes you feel better, just because you prefer it that way. It's not going to happen.
Well, that and why would you think they would?
Exactly.
I mean, if people speak French and you go up to them and you're like, fucking French people, I don't know why they're speaking French. They're speaking French because that's how they speak.
Yeah.
You know, and the reason that's popped up is because I said maybe we can examine this with a more conventional lens. It's as much as, like I said, people pop up and say, have a resistance to this type of examination of martial arts in the way that we do it. I'm also shocked by how many people are super receptive to it. Yeah. And I'll tell you, it is pretty nice when you're being stopped on the street by a Ray Longo or getting a message from, a professional fighter or whatever about insight that you got, that you explored in a podcast, or fucking when Iaquinta pulls you aside in New York City and says, dude, there's nobody doing what you're doing and we all appreciate it. You fucking appreciate that more. But when I commentated TKO the other weekend, I've stopped turning off commentary, not because it's not great. There's a lot of great commentary, but I don't want to be shaped by it. I want to, that is, the way people commentate is not the way to do it. It's a way to do it. And because it's been done so well, it's repeated. So I've been commentating with no, removing slowly over time, removing the structures of commentary. And the response has been really, really, really good. Really good. And I said the other day, we're looking at these fighters, and they are new fighters with new minds and new mindsets and developed in new ways with a new understanding and new ways to express fighting. We need, if we care deeply enough and we want to see it, we need to look at it with new eyes. And looking at it with new eyes, it offers you a new perspective. And for that, you'll need some new language. And that's where we are. And if you're still listening to this at this point, then you're with us. And that's fucking cool. It's really fucking cool. Because I'm really, like we said about time, I'm really excited to see. There are times where this isn't as valuable as we wish it could be. But wherever we get to in 3 years and 9 years, it'll be built on this path, getting to where we're going to understand and have massive breakthroughs in our understanding of the way humans express themselves in combat and what we can learn from that. The path to there is through here.
And the main problem too, like, just to add on what you were saying, the reason why people don't like going down rabbit holes is the deeper you go down, the stuff that you know, quote unquote, for a fact that you're certain of, is not true anymore.
You're
and people
right.
do not want to let go of that.
You're absolutely right. It's why it's also hard. It's why you get resistance. Resistance is common. Ridicule is also common. Hatred sometimes is common too, because
during the Mayweather-McGregor era.
Yeah, literally, for real. I was somewhere.
Actual hatred.
Yeah, for sure. I was somewhere the other day, and this kid came up to me and goes, oh, man, I forget where it was. He goes, man, I'm like such a fan of your work. He goes, but honestly, man, did you really think McGregor had a chance? And he was kind of half laughing, and he was uncomfortable, like he was worried I was going to hit him. And I was like, and I just looked at him and I said, he did have a chance. He did have a chance. And that's the point. That was the ultimate point of that, and it'll be the ultimate point of 5 things in the future. There's always a fucking possibility. And yes, of the 90 times that I addressed it, once I said he's going to win. The other 89 times I said it was highly unlikely, and you can pinpoint that one.
Which, by the way, that clip was like in Vegas after a couple of drinks the night before the fight.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, it was the morning.
After a couple of drinks.
It was after 3 hours, 3 hours of sleep after getting wasted with Irish people that night. But it was fucking possible. It's still possible. And you know what, man? Tenshin Nasukawa. I say that all the time. I get his name wrong all the time. I got your name wrong for a year.
Yeah. Nobody pronounced Tenshin's name right.
Yeah. It's fucking possible. Is it likely? No, it's not likely. But is it possible? Yes, it is possible. Of course it is. But that's asking a lot of people to see that. But you know what? There was a beautiful adventure in that, to be honest. Mm-hmm. It started with, he can't beat him because he's not a boxer and this is boxing.
Yeah.
And I think we got Sure, there were 3 or 4 layers was asking a lot, but I think to say to somebody, you could find a way to do some, if you have some relevant skills, you could find a way to perform well in something that you don't actually do. And I think we also
it was fun, man. It was trying to solve a riddle, like how, exactly. You're trying to figure out ways.
Yeah. And I think we also took apart what is karate or boxing or jiu-jitsu. I mean, they're just fucking doctrines.
Hey, it led to water.
Yeah, exactly.
We were able to get water out of it.
Exactly. That's the beauty of it, though. I mean, it's also like these things go on and on and on. But we were going to talk about Cyborg versus Nunes today, but I think this might be a good place to chill. Yeah. I do. For you podcast listeners, thank you for listening to this. It's been a real fun thing. It is different not addressing the camera and then chatting with Mark a little bit more as I kind of meander off. Mark deploys a bit of patience here and then a little jab of a direction to point the boat there. And I think it was really cool. And if you listen to the whole thing on the on YouTube, then thank you. That's cool. We'll be back with video. We will. Even if you say, hey, this is better. Back to the
usual stuff next week, yeah.
If you say, hey, this is better, cool. Then subscribe on iTunes. But we'll be back with the usual stuff next week. And if you just listened to the part about Gustafsson versus Jones and you're here, then you listened for a long time, go back and listen to the whole piece. If you want a t-shirt that simply says Bink with an exclamation point on it, go to shoprobinblack.com. Make sure you follow on Instagram at RobinBlackMMA. And at Enjoy the Enjoy the Hostilities. We're gonna get clips up in there. We'll start on that in the new year.
Yeah.
Any other things we need?
It's one last thing I forgot, just because I want to mention right off the top. Shout out to Daniel Cormier winning MMA Fighter of the Year from ESPN.
Can you? So
he was ranked 3rd for Athlete of the Year.
Yeah, amazing. So super quick on that too. How old is he? 40? What is he, 40?
I think he's in his 40s.
Pull it up. Mark's going to pull it up. He's either 39, 40, or 41. Okay? So I'd like you to pull that. And listen, fucking look at what Dan accomplished.
39,
again. 39. So pull up Frank Mir. How old's Frank Mir? Look at what Dan's accomplished. And again, this isn't fucking because he won a fight. This is because of a lifetime
same age.
Frank Mir's the same age. This is and this is not a knock against the fucking great Frank Mir.
No,
Please don't get me wrong. The only reason I bring this up is, these are lifetimes of work, and every human is different. And the reason I brought this up, and I hope if Frank has a broken bone in his face, and that's why he had to tap out of a fight. And good on him, and much love to Frank Mir.
Smart at this age too,
for
man.
sure.
Jesus.
But I hope there's still another fight in there for him if he wants it, because he can look at Dan and say, age is not a thing. Now your body is, experience is, everything you've been through, put yourself through, everything you've learned, all of that's a part of it. But the reason I brought up Dan as a comparison, Dan in his brilliant year at the end of 9? When did you start wrestling?
You know what? Just in thinking, it's all hitting me now. This was a legendary year for Daniel Cormier.
Fuck yeah.
This was an amazing year he had this year.
And I think what I'm getting at, to tack on to what you're saying, is it connects to what we were just talking about here. Did Dan Cormier have a legendary year this year? Dan Cormier, that's the culmination of his entire fucking lifetime. That's what that is. And you've met him a couple of times, and there's a Daniel Cormier little hangout on the YouTube channel. On the YouTube channel, Robin Black, Daniel Cormier, you'll find it. It's cool. Dan, I don't know if you asked 9-year-old Daniel Cormier or 13-year-old Daniel Cormier or 17-year-old Daniel Cormier, but I'll tell you somewhere in there, and maybe for sure by 26-year-old Daniel Cormier, he's building a greatness every day. Mm-hmm. He wasn't like, I hope I can become an Olympic champion and then retire. It was like, I need to be greater and greater and greater and greater. Mm-hmm. That's what that gets you. And Frank has done that as well. And the reason I brought up Frank and Dan in the same conversation is they both deserve the same amount of respect. Daniel's accomplishment of this year is where it all comes together late in life. And Frank is, hey man, there's still stumbles, but that doesn't mean it's over. And another reason I brought it up is people were like, there's, talking about, and again, If I look underneath the hood, and I hear people talking about fucking cars, I'm not going to go, well, see, it's a Posse, you know, it's a 444 barrel, because I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. And yet, a lot of people today will have opinions on things they know nothing about, and they'll be like, well, Frank Mir shouldn't be licensed. These commissions got to stop it. Chuck Liddell, Frank Mir. Frank Mir is the same age as Daniel Cormier, and look what Dan is doing. And yes, he's been knocked out, he's been injured, he's been hurt. There's no reason to not let Frank Mir fight if he still loves to fight. And there's no reason to think that the next fight Frank Mir won't be brilliant, because he still has that ability. You know?
And when we give Frank his roses, I mean, think about it. It's equally as impressive, because if you win a title at such a young age, to then keep that same level, but keep on improving, keep on growing, to be the fighter that you are now, that is impressive. He could have just degressed.
Or
right from him, right from
he
hitting
got
that championship.
Fucking shattered bones in his body in a motorcycle accident.
Yeah, after the accident, actually. Forget the Brock Lesnar fight. After the accident, he could have just said, I'm done. This is it.
He could have easily. And I guess the reason I brought it up, one, was to say, please don't start, you know, and every time a fighter loses or has a bad night, especially if they are a little older, people are like, you got to retire, it's time to retire, I hope he retires, make him retire, all this bullshit. But it's also like, you know, if it was all easy, we could all do it. The hard parts have lessons too. And as much as we celebrate Dan building to this year, we should also celebrate Frank. And if Frank comes back next year and goes out with a brilliant win, or has a couple more wins, or says, you know what, after a little more time off and a little more adaptation with his body and a little more learning, which he's done before and performed well, he comes back for a couple more great ones, then there'll be even more to learn than what we learned from the great Dan Cormier having one of the greatest years we've ever seen. There's beauty in all of this. There's learning there in all of it. There's why are we watching fighting? It's fucking cool to see people punch and kick, and to see victory and fear overcome and all these things. But if you study these guys for long periods of time, you're studying how to live life, how to overcome the challenges. And Frank's just had a tough night. And you don't look at it and go, life is shit now. You look at it and go, this is going to be a hard one to learn from, but I'm going to learn from it. And Frank's lesson may be, you know what? I've had a great career and I don't need this anymore. Or it may be, I'm going to go do one more great one, and me and Dan at 40 will both have wins, and Cormier will be a 2-division champion, and I will go out with a brilliant victory. He'll do what the fuck he wants, and as well he should, because of a great career. And I brought him up in the same conversation as Dan Cormier because they're the same guy. They're brilliant geniuses of combat. The difference is in the outcomes of a couple of moments in a couple of years, and they both deserve the same respect. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, fuck, can you imagine being Dan Cormier right now?
God.
Did you meet his kids? Have you seen it? Yeah, those are fucking the coolest kids ever. He seems to have the best family ever. He's great at his broadcasting job. The dude's like, fuck, this is the year of all years.
Smiling.
Yeah.
And, you know,
yet still working insanely hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. It must be pretty great being him. But you know what? Frank, it's probably pretty wonderful being Frank Mir too, because he knows who he is, and he knows that he's not somebody who just, you know, like the people who judge him. He's not like those people. He's a doer, and if the next do is retire, then fucking God love Frank Mir too. And I you know, God's not my thing, but I just felt like saying that. But that's probably it. That was a lot of fun, and we'll definitely do this again. And again, if you listened on YouTube, by all means say, yeah, this is even better. And if that's true, then all we'll do is rig it up in such a way where we're still talking to the camera and we've still got video, and I can still pull up the whiteboard and different stuff. But it's been fun. I'm glad we're back at it. Blackout.